Welcome back to Season 4 of Intrinsically Motivated. On today's episode, we'll be sitting down with David Julen. He's the pastor at First Baptist Church of Cramerton in Gaston County, North Carolina. He's also the leader of an addiction ministry called Unbinding Lazarus. I'm Tucker Clements, audio engineer and editor for Uplift Appalachia, and this is Intrinsically Motivated.
How did we meet? That's probably the better question. How did you find us? How did we find you? How did that connection get made?
Okay. Here's how I remember it anyway. I was talking to Brett McCarty at Duke, and Brett said, I was talking to him about trying to find out more about dealing with the brain and the mind and that aspect of addiction. And he said, I've got just the person for you to talk to. And so he gave me Andy's number, and we talked, and I didn't realize that she had a book or anything at that time, but she was very graciously, she talked to me, and during the process of that, she talked to me about the book. And I thought, if this is what it sounds like, this could really be an important piece in what we're trying to do, is to get people more aware and educated, motivated about being active in the fight against addiction here in Gaston County. So then she sent me the book, and devoured that, went over the book, and then I have taught it, I believe twice, 2 or 3 times, and one time to a group of folks that involved some ministers, but some active lay people at the Presbyterian Church in a local community, Belmont. And then I spoke to some, I believe it was some Methodist ministers, different ministers, and I taught the class, and one other time. So I have just really felt like it's an important piece, and part of trying to, I feel like it's one of the pieces for Unbinding Lazarus that could help us to have some legs, I suppose, to get out and trying to be sort of a unique ministry and making people aware. So I think that's
yeah,
as I remember it.
Right.
And I have to chime in here, because you were really instrumental, because if people notice, we're talking about the Trauma Informed Church book, and there are 2 editions, because I had an edition that did not have a study guide, and I remember you saying, do you have a study guide? And I said, well, I've thought about putting one together, and you said, well, if you do, I'll use it. And so I just added one, and we printed a second edition that has the study guide. So you were instrumental in making that a book with a study guide, and the first to really use it intentionally that way, which has been great.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that about the only thing I have to offer is that really all I've ever been has been a pastor at a local church, and part of I know what many pastors are looking for is they're wanting to do something, but they don't want to have to spend the time to try to create something from nothing. And, to have a workbook there that gives you a step up in trying to do it is important. And that's one of the things that I think about when I'm talking about the ministry we have now, the Unbinding Lazarus. We have a website that has all the different places, the places you can call to find help, and recovery centers and halfway houses and all those kind of things. It's to help people, give them a shortcut to try to help people. And I think that the workbook, anything you can do to make it easier for us as ministers to do something that's effective and helps our people, makes us look like we know something.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about Unbinding Lazarus. Tell me, where did that name come from? And then what are you doing with that now?
Well, several years ago, about the time COVID started, I was asked to help the church in Gaston County here, where we live, to be more active in the fight against addiction. It was when opioids were just exploding, and the government was part of it, the state and local government, the law enforcement, and several others, and they looked around and said, okay, but one of the things we don't find very active is churches. So through a series of events, fortunate for me, they asked me if I would try to do that, and I was really very fortunate. The person who funded the position, I told them I don't really know much about it, and they said, okay, well, just get yourself educated and find out more. So I plunged into that, and they allowed me to do that, and then we started. And about that time, COVID hit really big. Some of the things we had started to do, we weren't able to do. So, but it really gave me sort of a head start. It was called Faith Fighting Addiction. It was with a local group that was here that was trying to do that, and one person really funded it. So, and that went along for really a couple of years, and then they had a change in leadership and kind of decided to go in a different direction. So, but I always felt like that there was that it was important to speak to the churches in Gaston County in a way, in a language that they could understand about addiction and all the different things that come from it. So, Charles Spurgeon had a sermon, at least that's where I've heard about it, from John chapter 11, where Lazarus is resurrected, raised from the dead. And in that, he points out the fact that when Lazarus is resurrected by Jesus, but then Jesus relies on the surrounding disciples to push the tomb back and then to take the burial cloths off of him. And so I just use that as a metaphor to say that we don't save anybody. But what we can do is we can help unbind them from the clutches
I love that.
From addiction.
That's so good.
So,
and I'm a sucker for a really good metaphor, and that's an amazing.
Yeah,
that's an amazing. It's the pastor part of me that still misses getting to come up with all these great metaphors that are in Scripture for the things that we're doing. So I 100% support your metaphor usage there. That's so good. So I mean, you said you didn't really understand it. You didn't have a lot of expertise, a lot of education in this area. Why do you think you were the one that was approached to kind of try to start helping motivate and equip that? Why do you think that you were the one that got that call?
Well, there was when it first started, there was a conference, and I wrote a little theological piece, kind of how addiction plays into the idea of how the church can address addiction, and some of it was how we can look at it from a biblical way, that it's our role to be active in helping people with all kinds of problems. And as I remember, it basically integrated some of those thoughts, and so I thought sort of that was it. And I thought it kind of came to me. They had the conference, and then it was over. But then that actually led to a person that came up from that and said, "We'd like for you to try to motivate churches around here to do that." And
yeah, so if anything, the real lesson is don't write about something if you don't want that to also become your calling and your vocation and that sort of thing. That's
right. But from my point of view, I believe that the Lord was in it, and He helped. And so I found it. I found it something that came along in my life that gave me a way to sort of expand another part of my ministry and who I was and what I was doing. And it really it came along in a good time for me professionally and personally. So I sort of look at that as providentially.
Right. Yeah. So I guess, and this is an interesting question for me, because a lot of people that we work with, and I don't know about folks that you're starting to have conversations with, say, I don't have any experience with addiction, or I don't have any history with this. So did you have any connection to addiction other than you were in a culture, you were in a society, and the society was having the struggle and you saw it from a Christian perspective? Or did you have any particular connection with addiction or recovery work before that?
Yeah, I've had some family that has struggled with that, and I believe that my brother struggled with that, and he passed away at 39, so that was one of the things. But the other was just the damage that I saw as a minister, and what I thought that there was sort of a vacuum there that needed to be filled. I think one of the things that I found was that oftentimes in the church, the sense was, well, if you just get your heart right with Jesus and, make your real commitment, then you will be able to overcome addiction. And the fact you hadn't overcome it is the fact that you really weren't sincere. And, maybe that's somewhat simplistic, but I think that's kind of how, at least I saw many people express it. And I just thought, it's far more complex theologically than that, and medically, physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah, that points out, I didn't realize we had this in common. My sister also died at 39 from addiction. So we have that too. And at that time, and I say that's not really even what drove me to doing this now, but I realized back then I was very bad at how to care for people or to support people that were struggling with addictions. And so that sort of gives me some clout, and it gives me some experience. I can definitely empathize with people, but
he didn't die directly, but he died as a result. He smoked and and then really drank too much, and he was a great guy. But then his heart, he had heart problems, and that didn't help it. So
right, yeah,
kind of like a lot of those things.
Yeah, hers was eventually, I think, ruled multiple organ failure, but it was obviously the living hard and fast and using many substances. But yeah, I think the complexity, because we hear that a lot with if you just pray harder or go to the recovery meeting downstairs, and when you're all clean, you can come up and be a Christian or whatever. And it's like, that is so not the story, and just helping people to understand, and even wrestle through the scriptural part of what is physical, what is mental, what is spiritual, what is it's hard, and I think people want something very cut and dried, and they don't have if they can blame it on the person, they don't have as much responsibility in it, and that's a big piece that we have to change.
You're exactly right. And it's interesting. This is kind of jumping ahead, Tanner. I don't know, where you want to go with this.
I'm going wherever you're going.
All right. Well, I had coffee with one of our Superior Court judges and with our DA a few weeks ago, and a couple of people from the board. And our county for a few years has had something called Recovery Court. Are y'all familiar with that?
Yes, we have those here.
Yeah. Well, and I was struck by the fact that here in this Recovery Court, and I went a couple of weeks ago, and then I'm going to go tomorrow, that there is, while often in church, there seems to be more of, I think because of ignorance, there's more of a punitive sense, you're wrong, get your life right, and, we're supposed to let you hit rock bottom. And not all of them, but I think there is some of that. And I was struck by, in the Recovery Court, there is certainly an idea of treatments, all the kinds of treatment. It's not a 30-day. It's like you can go up to 16 months. There's acknowledging they're going to fall, likely relapse, and the process when they come into court. I've been in the court a few times, but here, when they came in, the judge knew them by their name, knew their name, and they say, Bill Jones, whatever the name is, come up. They come up front. People start clapping, and they say, "Oh, you got 120 days sober." The assistant DA gives them a hug, and then the other one, and that all sounds kind of touchy-feely kind of stuff. People don't like, but what I was struck by from being in court, a lot of those folks, people like that, not those ones specifically, but when they come up, they're kind of surly and trying to be tough and and all that kind of stuff and reactive. And in this, they're just kind of walking up there. They're almost like kids, And I realized that a lot of those folks have never had many people saying, way to go, especially in the court system, and if you're involved in in the courts. And so they come up and they talk about, some of them are moving forward, some of them are not, but the judge knows. He talks to them about the process. How's it going with your family from the last time? I see where you fell back. You didn't show up at a probation, and so it's not just pat you on the hand, everything's great, but very much affirming them in their journey. They have a little wheel where they turn when they leave, and you get like a little gift. It's like a $10 gift kind of thing, and you can say it's corny, you can say whatever, but I found it very redemptive, and
I hate that you're having to kind of juxtapose that against the church, which you're saying is more punitive, and you'd think it would be the opposite way around. You would think that the justice system's the punitive one, and the church is the welcoming and receptive group. And I hear exactly what you're describing, and I can give you an example. Like I just recently gotten to experience this. I've been driving. There's one guy that I've been giving rides to from his recovery house to his job. I've been driving him, 3 days a week to and from work, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, that sort of thing. Every other week, I have to pick him up to take him to work from his, his court appointment out at the courthouse. And this last week, when I went to pick him up from the courthouse, when he opened the door to get in, he was just giggling and smiling and chatting with one of his friends on the phone. And I waited till he finished his call, and I said, "You seem like you're in a good place." He said, "Well, my probation officer accidentally let it slip that I have," I don't remember what it was, 3 months left or 4 months left, and I'm going to be done. And it's like they were excited that they let it slip, but it was just to see that joy. Like you're saying, he'd been told, "You're almost out of this. You've almost done all the things that you have to do." And now the rest of the ride was him saying, "That means when I get done with this, that I can start doing this, then I get my license back, then I can get a motorcycle, then I can drive myself." And it's just like, he's so excited. It's like, those are the kinds of joys that, honestly, the church does a good job of sharing that with people whose situations we understand really well, but we don't always know how to experience that same joy with somebody that's maybe coming from a place that we haven't experienced in the same way. And I think that's that part that you're kind of getting called to, that we feel called to be a part of, is helping to say, we can still be a part of the journey with people, even that we don't have that same life experience, or we haven't maybe been through the prison system, or we haven't had to deal with, parole or all of these different sorts of things. But if we can kind of just see the people the way that we ought to, and the way that we do with people that we understand better, then we're going to be able to more effectively respond to people and love them in a way that we ought to be doing anyways. Yeah,
and I think you pull something there, even what you have just sort of seen, just observed yourself, goes back to that interest that you and I, and Tanner too, share about just like the brain development piece and the neurobiological piece and all of that, that a lot of these folks, one of the things that we know is whenever they started really abusing substances or maybe got, just were locked in being traumatized or whatever at an early age, it kind of sets them at that age. It's like they don't necessarily develop beyond that. And so when you think of some of these people are still living as a 16-year-old, they might be 45, but they're still really much like a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever. And so having not had that, somebody cheer you on or somebody go to your sporting event or whatever, they've been living in survival mode since then. This is that sort of first taste, and to see just how that scratches an itch they didn't know they had or whatever, fulfills some piece of them that wasn't there. I think if people can understand that, then they might be more inclined to treat people that way and to see the value of that. And I think some of these courts, the recovery courts, have figured that out. Some of the treatment programs have figured that out. Maybe the church needs to figure that out.
More enlightened. I mean, and all these folks that are involved in it, they are Christians, and they are people. I mean, or at least the ones I know, but they are. I think that faith plays a role in their willingness to be involved in this. But that's why I like you're talking about metaphors, your image of walking. When we walking with others toward flourishing. I feel like that's one of the things that we can convey to people in the church, that it's not fixing others toward flourishing, it's walking with others. And that means that some of that is just going to be seen as walking with people that don't seem to be making any progress, that are falling backwards, but that you're being a witness and you're being a person that can help. I think that families of people who suffer from addiction in some ways may need as much support as the people in suffering from addiction, because they are often devastated. They think that, okay, if we can just hurry up, initially, if we can just get this person fixed, then everything will go back to normal. And unfortunately, quite often, it's a journey that almost takes you down to your knees, really, because you have to try to say, how do I react to this person? How do I help them? Because am I helping them? Am I helping them, or am I enabling them? I'm angry at them. I'm upset with them. How do I work with this? And I just think that being willing to listen and walk with them.
Yeah, and that's why I think it takes so much preparation work on our end as people that want to help people in that. It's like the more we can understand what people are going through, but also the more we can have a lot of people that also understand, so that, because it is exhausting to help care for somebody who is struggling, and to have more people that also understand that, be able to support, like you said, support the families as much as we're supporting the people that are struggling directly. I think having that support system around you is so vital, which is why it can't just be, one individual at a time that gets excited, but it needs to be whole communities, whole churches, whole, large swaths of people that.
And also knowing that it's not on us. That's the thing. It's like, it's not just people doing it right. It's people knowing that God knows how we're supposed to do it. I spout the James 1:5 all the time. Pray for wisdom, do that. Pray for wisdom, do that. Pray for wisdom, do that. And it's like, and when we're angry, we can tell them, we're angry. This person did it again. You love them, fix them, but knowing that it's not, their success is not dependent on us working hard enough, just like our own success is not dependent on us working hard enough. If we seek God's wisdom and we follow that and we model that, and hopefully as we're walking with, God will steer us both in a direction that is going to be more helpful for them. But it's easier to steer if you're together,
But I agree with what Tanner says though too. I mean, absolutely what both of you say, but it's hard. And I think, I ask you, why do churches not some time ago asked you, what do you think one of the reasons Christians have not been involved in as much as they should be in addiction work? And one of the reasons you said, well, it's hard work.
Yep.
It's hard work. It's walking with people that will try to take advantage of you, that you feel like that they're doing so well. And then all of a sudden you realize they're not.
Right.
They're hiding it from you. And we shouldn't be surprised at that, but we are. And I just almost sometimes you have to label it. And sometimes you have to be tough. You have to say, hey, listen, okay, if you're going to do this, then I can't do any more.
Right.
And boy, that's a hard balance to attain.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and this is a thing that I have conversations with people in churches all the time. It's what's the return on investment if we get into this, this ROI kind of conversation that you have. It's like,
right.
And once it gets hard, or once you see people, failing, or once you see that challenges or the collateral damage that comes along with investing yourself into this specific kind of work, it gets scary, and it's easy to say, well, we're just going to back off until we think we're ready. And I don't know that any of us are ever really ready, because we don't ever know exactly what kind of situation we're walking into the very next time we interact with the same person we've been working with for, a long period of time. But I think a lot of times it's, a lot of this goes back to understanding. We don't understand what we're getting ourselves into because we haven't done a good job of preparing setting a good foundation, a solid foundation to build on. So we don't set our expectations well. And then when we get ourselves into the work, it gets difficult, or we have, I have lots of different examples. But it's like, once it gets kind of messy, or once we start worrying about the perception that people are going to have of us because it looks like we're surrounding ourselves with, quote unquote, those people, or it's just our normal way of life has been changed because, things are different now because of the different people that are, in our community, or whatever it is. It's easy to kind of back off. I think of like when Paul confronted Peter, when it's like Peter was hanging out with the Jews, and all of a sudden he started acting like a Jew again. And he started, practicing this way. And Paul's like, what are you doing, man? You're just going back to look like the people that are all around. And I think we panic because we do look different if we're doing this kind of work, and we're going to be perceived different. And because we have that kind of innate desire to be accepted by our people, it's sometimes easier to kind of regress back to where we were, or to kind of shy away from the work that we're doing. And I think that is one of those reasons why what we're doing, what I think you're wanting to start doing more and more of, is really establishing with churches, this is what you're getting yourself into. Be prepared for the kinds of things that you're going to expect, because if people don't know what to expect and they just jump in, they're not gonna flourish because they didn't know what they were getting themselves into.
Right. I think there's the ability, if say your typical Southern church is getting into this work, they're getting into it, not that they're already in it. It's like they have to go get into it, and then they kind of have the luxury of backing back out when it's hard. But the people that they then stop helping are still in it. It's like, well, I don't really want to do addiction work. Well, it doesn't mean that people aren't still going to die down the street. They're going to keep dying. You're just not doing anything about it. Or you can be in it and be really sad and upset when people die. And we want, because I think we're at a point where it's how could we not? And we want to see the whole church at the how could we not point.
Well, and I think I see this. I don't know if y'all see, but I see this, I guess, in my own life and in churches and even in recovery organizations, that they may go through 2 or 3 or 4 or however many, and then somewhere down the line, they seem to be failures, but then somewhere down the line something hits, and it may be that our part was to do our part, and then somewhere down the line this person gets finally everything, it comes together at the right time, and all those experiences culminate in somebody getting into recovery and
Right.
long-lasting.
Goes back to Paul's, I planted, you watered. It's the same thing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think that's, when you talk about those images, and I think the images of, oftentimes when we don't see anything happening, that the image of the seed, the good seed, from Mark and Matthew, parables over the seed, but there's something going on below the surface. And the idea of, sometimes they blast off and everything seems peachy, like the plant that grows and later withers. And I think sometimes using some of those images can be helpful as a way to understand what's going on in people's lives, because people can kind of hang on to it. And I think you mentioned this before when in the book, it talks about how many times people relapse. I think that without being an excuse, I think that's important for people to understand as we educate, because when and I know if somebody relapses, everybody feels let down. Everybody feels destroyed. But if you have a little better sense, okay, this happens, and I don't know how to always make it where it's okay if you relapse. I don't mean to be giving people permission. I don't know how to walk that all the time. But even if people outside the family in the church can say, well, now, David, he had 3 months of sobriety, and then he relapsed. But that's when we need to run into the place and say, okay, let's get, instead of you, I talked about an image one time with a group. Instead of, there's Highway 85 here, and you can, if you're sometimes with 321 north, it's just a highway going north, and all of a sudden the person's going along and they get on 320, they fall out of recovery, they go back into addiction, and they get on 321, but if they get off at a little town and drive a few miles down the road and get back on 85 south, that's what we want. But sometimes people get on 321 and wind up in Cleveland or Minnesota, and they never come back. But if we can stop them and help them instead of just throwing our hands up, and it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. It's easy to say that, but it's very hard to do that. I think that's where, some of the education about addiction can help. But I have a friend who, we talk about people who are, we can see the effects of addiction written all over them. But I have a friend who has a church that's upper professionals, mostly many professionals, wealthy, and a lot of folks. And he did the little small group study I have called Don't Go Back to Egypt. But anyway, it sort of opened. Yeah, and there are so many people, though, who are functional addicts that look on the outside of doing well. And would never say that I'm an alcoholic or I'm an addict, but they are. And so there's these folks that we can look at and see, and then there's these other gambling, alcohol, addiction, pornography, all these things that are just permeating through our churches, and I think that we need to address it and to help them too. They're harder,
right?
Frankly.
Right. Yeah.
And it's going to get more uncomfortable as you begin to uncover those things over time before it gets better again. And I think that there's that fear that it's going to make things harder, or it's going to make things more uncomfortable, or you're going to hurt relationships, or hurt your bottom line sometimes. I think that's a legit, but again, that's a legitimate fear. We talk about, why people do certain things. We also can talk about why people don't want to, involve themselves in certain things. And I think that's because there are legitimate fears that we've built up because we don't fully understand, or we're not fully bought in yet on the fact that we just have, like we were saying, we have to do this because it's too necessary right now. And I think that, it takes time to even within the church to, just like we say, it might take a long time and a lot of practice for somebody who's been in addiction to find and eventually stay in recovery. They might have to practice recovering several different times before it really sticks. The same thing is going to probably be true for a lot of churches too, that they're going to practice trying to do work with people with addiction. and they're going to fail and they're going to quit and then they're going to have to start over again. But they're going to know a little bit better each time. And I think just the same way that we want to be, long-term partners with people who are struggling with addiction, finding recovery, whatever that looks like. I still want to be, and I'm sure that you're probably in the same place. I'm still happy to be a long-term partner with a church that's going to figure it out over the long haul. Because I think if they do eventually figure it out, especially some of those churches that are slow, because you have some of the churches that are ready to hop in, and I'm going back to your, planting seeds in the ground metaphor. It's like they get really excited, it springs up really fast, and then it's going to get choked out because they weren't really ready because it wasn't the right time. Same thing with addiction recovery. It's the same thing is true with these churches, but, if we continue to cultivate the ground and eventually the churches that it might seem a little bit slower before that seed starts to take root, maybe those are going to be some of our most effective churches in the long run because there's this great foundation now that's built on, and even with some long-term trial and error and some starting and some stopping, just like somebody in addiction, I think that can be true for the way that we do ministry as churches as well. And that's hard for me to sometimes, rest in because, I'm ready to let's go. We need to be doing this now. And I want to see it all happening. And, I've got all these big visions and I'm sure you do too for what it could be. But sometimes I have to remind myself that, I've been slowly learning to think about this for a lot longer than a lot of these churches that I'm talking to.
Right, but those failures that we have practiced.
That we have already practiced, they're just at the beginning of their practicing their failures and they're trying again and that sort of thing.
Tanner, that's a great word for you for me to hear too, because I can see that in my mind, or how okay, look, these people started out and then they faded out, and the problem's still there. And for me to give them some grace, like I would say to give grace to somebody.
Right. Well, when we talk about the people do things for reasons, which I know you remember from the book, but in every training we do, it's like even the folks that aren't getting on board with our addiction ministry have reasons, and it's like giving them, like you say, give them some grace, and it might be that is not their exact thing. Some other part is, or they will come along or whatever. But it's like benefit of the doubt. Let's be curious. Let's work together and mutually support wherever folks are in the process is going to go a lot further than you didn't do it. I'm writing you off. I'm going to the next place or whatever. Which we.
Well, yeah. I can. We're humans. I can see that. I mean, I have not done that really explicitly, but I've in my mind thought, I'm just writing you off. You are, the problem and you just don't want to deal with it. And I tell you, if that comes across to people, they're not going to come back anywhere in the future.
Yeah.
You might as well write them off because they're not going to. And that's really up to us.
So I want to kind of transition just a little bit, just to kind of hear a little bit more about what you're working toward right now with Unbinding Lazarus and that sort of thing. I know we're working on trying to partner together to do some sort of training events in your area at some point in the future, and that we'll get that worked out. But what are the specific things that you're as an organization trying to get started? What are the things that you're already doing? Maybe what are some of the things that you're praying are going to happen soon for you?
Well, one of the things, we are sort of at what I'm hoping at the cusp. Maybe birth pains that were going to come forward. And right now what we have is we have our website, Unbinding Lazarus, which we have a place there you can find help and if you wanted to go in, and you can find for the places in Gaston County where you can get more information, where you can go to treatment at a lower cost and those kind of things, and then all the various recovery places. And I don't make any endorsements. I just, it's out there. It's for people. They can go there to find it. And what I think about that is that when somebody's ready, oftentimes somebody comes to us and says, I need some help. They may be ready, or they may just be, blowing smoke, but when they say, I need some help, it's hard when you have to try to figure out where to go, and there's probably going to be a delay process there. Might be a couple of days, it might be a couple of weeks, I don't know. But sometimes when you come back around to them, that window has passed, that's closed. So one of the things I'm doing with this is I hope that it'll give people. I'd like to have people in their churches to put this on their website, to be thinking that this is a resource, and it's a little different than but you can basically probably do this with go online and give me all the different places, but here it is at a central place. And also, like, I have a friend who is on the board, and he's been on many other boards, and he said people have come to him and with somebody that has a problem, and he, because of his experience of growing up here and being on all these different boards, he said, well, maybe you need to call so and such. But he said, I realize that most people don't have that knowledge that I have. So here's something with that knowledge. Another, like, hopefully it's a cheat sheet, shortcut to do that. And I think that I think that, that can be helpful. That's what I would like. Plus, also there's a section on find resources, which I have some sermons, and I have a small group study, and I have some articles, and this is from Andy's suggestion. I have on that part, I have the YouTube channel Put the Shovel Down, and I actually called Amber Hollingsworth, and she gave me permission to do this. So it's on our website, and and it's just all that thousands of practical things that she has there. So that's one of the things, and then I hope that we can promote that recovery and all these things are a church opportunity, a ministry. And we said we teach this book, and we've had some sessions when I was doing the previous, which we'd like to implement, like, when am I, like, helping or enabling relapse, detour, dead end, just some of those things that are just trying to get that understanding that I have, that some of this stuff that we've talked about more out in the community. And there's some people who will listen to this because it comes from the church, that they may not listen to it at other times. And I've also found that even pastors of, well-educated pastors of large churches have very little understanding often, with some exceptions, of all the resources we have in the community.
Yeah.
And while I do think it's the churches, the church, we've fallen short in a lot of ways, but at the same time, there's also some responsibility. Well, for example, I used to go teach at this, it was a men's recovery center, and it would be, it's like kind of a faith-based residential program, and just do various things. But I remember when I first went there, this was a long time ago, I said, well, how many of you, when you were struggling with this, would say, I need to go to the church? That's where I can find some help. And to the last man, they said, well, that's the last place we go. And then I understood that. But then I found as a little bit deeper, I realized that their own sense of stigma and their own sense of shame impacts that. It's not just every church has been harsh to them. So, I think it's a balance there that we have to work through.
Yeah, they're being burdened by their own life as well, and that fear.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like we could do a good job of helping remove that, but at the same time, there's still things that they're holding on to unnecessarily as well. Yeah, that's a great point.
So I'm hoping we'll be able to shape and promote, recovery and education about addiction in Gaston County. I also have this dream. I don't know if it will happen, but there was a book that I read many years ago that really resonated with me. Is Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but it was in the beginning when people were studying the brain and everything, and he talked about the power of habits in certain people. And one of the things that he had was I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you don't remember, Tanner, but in the first, or in George W. Bush's administration, they had a Secretary of Treasury called Paul O'Neill. And Paul O'Neill had gone into Alcoa, and he came in, and when they put him there, they'd been really down low. And basically at the first big presentation, all the stockholders, they said, well, what's your plan, to turn this around? He said, well, I'm going to focus on worker safety. And they're like, look at each other and like, okay, well, whatever, but, that's not what we want to hear. But what he did was he said that, and he had worked in the government in different places, he said that everybody, anytime in these aluminum plants that they did all this stuff, there was a lot of injuries. Anytime there is a problem on the floor, somebody's hurt, I want to know about what happened and how you rectified it in 24 hours. And basically what he did is he implemented that. And what it did was he called that a keystone habit. And what it did was it eventually promoted kind of communication and sharing and everybody working together, not just about safety, but in so many other things, because he fired people if he didn't find out what they'd done about it within 24 hours. And, I've never worked in a big Fortune 500 company, but there's a lot of layers between, in the floor and to the chairman of the board. So, what a keystone habit is something that impacts people that everybody can agree on. And nobody could disagree with worker safety, even though they might have thought that was the most important thing, but nobody could disagree with that. And so what that habit did, it had like a lot of, you want to say, little levers that help open things up to this communication. And it began more communication up and down the line. And at the end of it, Alcoa had their stock quadruple their revenue, many, many times over. So, it's a big success story. But I tried to think about what could we do in Gaston County that would be a habit among the churches that we could all do, that we could all agree on. The only thing I could think of was prayer. And so this is what I would like to do. It's what I aspire to do or dream to do. I'd like for once a month, every church in Gaston County to have have a prayer about addiction. And if we wanted to, we could send it out to them and say, if you want to pray about dealing with children or dealing with families or whatever. And then here's the prayer if you want to pray it, or you do it your own way. And so what I hope would happen would be that there would be all of a sudden in all these churches, these little decisions, and all of a sudden maybe somebody would be thinking all of a sudden that addiction is something that, we should mention in the church, or maybe just somebody says, I've finally, once a month, they'll pray about something I'm struggling with or somebody I know struggling with. So, I don't know if that'll happen, but I'd like for it.
That's such a simple idea, but I absolutely love it. I want to hear how this goes once you spin this up and it's taken over. I'm like, how can we do this here?
When the addiction numbers miraculously drop in only Gaston County and nowhere around.
Gaston County. Yeah.
And
just because
people say, what happened there? Yeah.
That's such a great idea.
And there's going to be some churches most churches, prayer might be all they ever do. But prayer's prayer. And
right.
Yeah. But it's also amazing how once we start praying about stuff, God, instead of answering a prayer directly, just changes our heart for how we're going to be a part of it.
Where our heart goes, we're going to end up following it. Yeah, that's phenomenal.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
That's such a great idea. It's not even sneaky or deceptive, or you're trying to trick people into anything. You're just trying to tell people do what we ought to be doing anyways. But here, let me give you some specific things.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, because this is the question that I've been asking everybody on the podcast for the last year, and I have been so encouraged by many of all these answers that I get to this question. So I just want to ask you, and I'll let you kind of answer it however you want to. So however you take this, you can answer it. What excites you right now? What are you excited about right now?
And that can be in the topic that we've talked about, or anything, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited that I see glimmers of people here in the work in Gaston County that are willing to try some new things, are open to some things, that are open to faith being an aspect that is important in addiction and recovery work. And to me, I see these little glimpses or little openings where, well, we had a police chief here a few years ago, and I remember he said, he's tough guy. That's all he'd ever done, and but he said this was in the midst of the opioid problem. He said, we just can't arrest our way out of this, and that gave a lot of the people who. A lot of the people who had been working there some support or cover. Really not me, but I mean other people that, because I hadn't been that involved in it yet. But some that there are some more options rather than just throwing people in jail, because he could see I'm just throwing the same people in jail. They're no better. I go out and get them again. And anyway, so I see some glimmers of people that are willing to be open to, and I hope that we can be a part of it. That's what I'm hoping. It's a bit frustrating at times, but persevering. I hope we can do that. So that makes me excited. That when I see some things, what I think like the Unbinding Lazarus could, especially when people say we need more people to understand about what are the resources. I'm like, well, hey,
hello, I'm
let me
here.
tell you,
Yeah.
Yeah. And also with, I think that people need to talk more about in churches, preach about it and teach about it. And I hear people asking about some resources for that. And again, I'm kind of like, well, here they are. They may not be the greatest sermons or whatever. If you're a preacher, you can find a hook somewhere. And, like the thing about John 11 passage about Jesus asking the disciples to take the cloths off they bound them. And, if you're a teacher or a preacher, you don't have to take mine. I mean, but you can use that hook and do that. And so I'm hoping that that's going to be also to bear fruit. So
that's awesome. And I feel like, since we have been talking, not just today, but even in the past, it's like I feel like what you're doing and what we're doing are on these parallel paths. And so I hear the things that are exciting to you, I feel. The things that are frustrating to you, I feel, because we feel those exact same things. The questions that you're asking, the ways that you're trying to go about it are the same kinds of things. So I'm so excited that we've gotten to start working together. I'm glad we got to have this as a conversation too, because I think it really kind of establishes why what you're trying to do in Gaston County, what we're trying to do up here are so similar.
And I think hopefully others who maybe haven't found us or you will find this, and it's like, finally somebody who gets it, and I'm not alone out here trying to do this, because I think there probably are way more than we know of, and hopefully we'll all find each other.
Right. And then it is, as you say, that is encouraging to speak to somebody that seems to resonate with, and they say, I think what you're on is the right path. And yeah, that really is that's an encouragement for me. And maybe in the future we can, because it's important to have people that can listen to you and talk to you and encourage you and things like that.
We think community is everything, and that's true of the people doing the work too. So this has been so encouraging just for me. I think there's been I can't wait to go back and re-listen to this conversation again once we put this episode out, because I just think there's so many helpful things that you said. And I think just the ways that we're all working toward the same things and we're praying the same prayers and seeing the same God do kind of miraculous things is just has been so amazing to see. And I am excited to see kind of what God does next for all of us. So thank
y'all for your work. It's very encouraging to people.
Yeah, and thank you for hopping on and talking about all these things. I'm sure we'll have to do a follow-up, in a year once you've gotten even more established at what you're doing, and we can say, look at all these things that are happening and see how we can learn from what you've been doing. And I just want to hear all the testimony that comes out of, just you getting a whole county to pray about this. I want to know what that does too. So.
Well, I hope so, and I hope y'all can come, and I'll see you before a year.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure,
definitely.
Yeah. This is. I'm just saying for the pod, we'll update the podcast in a year and talk about all the amazing things that we all did together. So
we'll do the press release of the phenomenal whatever it is that we end up doing together.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there'll be so much publicity we won't know what to do.
Right.
It's gonna be great.
This has been a podcast powered by Uplift Appalachia. To learn more, you can find us at upliftappalachia.org or at Uplift Appalachia on Instagram.